Welcome, welcome everybody to this week's Cafecito episode. This is an exciting topic. I've never had this topic with anyone before. So I am excited to dive into this with you, Zandra. Welcome, welcome. And give us a quick little background on you before we
I
begin.
will. I will. Sorry, before I even start, I have to just acknowledge our names are very, very similar. And in
Yeah,
Spanish, the
yeah,
pronunciations are almost identical. And I just looked at our tops and we're like inverted with the stripes. So we're in the zone.
yes.
Okay, so I am Sandra Montes. I am an executive coach, a facilitator, um, a consultant, but really the short version of even that is I'm a team and leadership enthusiast. Like if
Mhm.
nobody knows kind of what my background is, that's it. Teams and leadership. That's my jam.
Okay. I love it. I love it because that's what we're here for is make sure we're elevating teams. So this is a great topic today. And I want to hear more of that incorporated into this. Um, so today's topic is finding your zone of genius. And what got me excited is how excited you were when you mentioned it. I was like, oh man, she's really into this topic. This is going to be excellent. So I'm excited to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so give us a synopsis and we'll start diving into how can we find our zone of genius and start delegating because that's very hard to do,
That
especially
is
in
it
new
is
teams.
very hard to do. So a couple things, right, is there are things that we can do on our own to identify our genius, right? There's probably things that if I rattled them off to you, you know, right? Like Sandra's really good at planning events or parties or with graphics or whatever it is, right? You probably, there's some things that you innately know about yourself that you can say, okay, I would say this resonates with me. This is in my area of genius. Part of it you might just get feedback from other people, like you can actually ask folks, right? Where do you think I add the most value? Like when I'm helping with something, where is it like my name comes to mind, right? You can get that feedback. And then there's a variety of assessments out in the market, tried and true, that really help hone in. That's one of the things, like I am a facilitator for one in particular, that's called the Working Genius. But the concept is the same, right? Is just getting really clear on the things that you are good at, sort of your elevation of thinking, right? Some of us are better at thinking big picture, thinking strategically, thinking like that 5-year plan. And some of us are naturally more in the weeds of things. And that's not to say that one is good or one is bad. It's just, it's who we are. And it's very difficult to change that. It's just, it comes naturally to us almost effortlessly. And when we can really hone in on those things, this, and I'll share, this is my own personal opinion, is that is a much better use of our time, right? I would rather spend my time, my effort, my energy in those areas of things where I know it's going to have good result. I know I'm going to get a lot of bang for my buck, if you will, and it'll probably be easy and enjoyable for me versus let me work twice as hard, probably renegar, if you will, all the way stomping like I don't really want to do this thing because it's not fun.
Yeah,
I'm kind of fighting uphill the whole way. So that is in a nutshell kind of what honing in on our zone of genius is. Does that make sense? Any
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that you brought up that some of us are big thinkers. We like to see that big picture, and some of us are in the weed. And sometimes we're a little bit of both, though, right?
Yeah.
Especially as entrepreneurs. So that's what I really, really want to dive into is how do we, um, when we're doing something that sometimes we find our flow in, right? And
Mhm.
is that part of that zone, right? When you find your flow and you're just going and it's effortless and you're creative and you're getting it done versus like you mentioned where okay, I got to do this, I don't want to do this, and it's going to
Yeah.
take me 10 times as long as somebody else because I'm just not in my flow, I don't enjoy it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
then something like that we'll have to
Yeah.
delegate of some sort.
Exactly. Well, so and when like even saying delegate, like that's kind of a loose term, right? Because delegate
Yeah.
might be literally you're asking someone else to do it, outsourcing it to a vendor or a housekeeper or a dog walker. Like you can delegate, you can outsource. Um, you can sometimes say no. I know that's like a foreign concept sometimes. It's
Yeah.
sometimes say no. Um, we can't always get away with things, right? Like in certain roles, positions, whether that's in your personal and your work life, you can't delegate certain activities.
Correct.
So for the ones like I'll say personally for me, um, the tasks that are not my favorite, that I can't delegate, I can't outsource, they're on me. I tend to time box them, right? And it's usually earlier in the morning to say, okay, from 8 to 9 or 8 to 10 or whatever the relative time is, that's when I'm going to get all those things out of the way, because then guess what? For the rest of the day, I can actually hone in on the things where I actually enjoy it and I feel like I'm being more productive,
Yeah.
and I get more energy. So delegate really means a number of things. And I think the one other one that I didn't mention is, and this is really difficult for anyone that might identify as a high achiever or a perfectionist, is sometimes even doing good enough work, right? Mediocre work, because not every task is equal. Some things are very important. You need to give it 110%. Some things can fall through the cracks and everyone will be okay, and there's not big impact to
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
And deciphering those. And when we have those high achiever perfectionist tendencies, that is really difficult. It's really difficult to not do anything but our best. But let me tell you, as a recovering perfectionist myself, it is one of the most liberating things that I was able to do on my own. And I highly, highly encourage people to kind of at least entertain the idea of sometimes good enough is good enough.
Yeah. I love this comment also from Adriana, just came in. Delegate implies to guide others with the right path of success to achieve task. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Hmm.
love that. I
Yep.
love that, because delegate is not only guiding, but it's also empowering someone else, right?
Hmm.
Is if I'm going to delegate a presentation that needs to be done to Sandra, I'm going to give her guidelines of ultimately, this is what I want to happen at the end of the presentation. This is the information I want to say. It should be X number of slides. The
Hmm.
presentation is going to be X number of minutes. But then I need to release that power
Yep.
and give Sandra the authority and those guidelines to be able to actually do the work.
Yeah.
And it's helpful both ways, right? It's helpful to the person that's doing it because they know, okay, this is my game plan, this is what's expected, and these are my parameters. And it's helpful to the person that gets alleviated from
Yeah.
that particular task.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
really like
And
that.
it's what I've come to learn, which was difficult at first, is that during that letting go process of giving somebody a task, it's always we have our own way of doing things, right? We like it a certain way, a specific way, and then sometimes you hand it off and the work is not going to be up to how you would do it, or you're very like, okay, we need these changes done. But like you mentioned, sometimes it depends on the project. Sometimes good enough works,
Yeah,
and being okay with that versus in the beginning. I know for me, it was just difficult. Like, I know what I want to see. And then, I have the vision in my head. I need you to kind of put it together. And it's always been, all right, let me finish it. Well, in the beginning. Now I don't. Now I have a lot of hands off because I
delegate
learned
away.
because I realize you cannot move forward. As much
Yeah,
as we want to hold on things, we want to have control, we want to be that final. You're not going to be able to move forward unless you have the capacity within you to say, I need to put this off, and it may not be the perfect way that I do it, but good enough, so long as it achieves the job that it's meant to do.
yeah, yeah. And you bring up a really, really good point. They're not only, it doesn't allow you to move forward in that day or in that week or in that month, it will hold you back in your career, right? If you're
Yep.
holding all of the tasks because you can't let go of that control, how will you achieve more, right? You can't
Yeah.
just continue plopping more and more and more and holding all the things and doing all the things. So that was a really, really good point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we are multi-talented, right? So we have to, this is why this conversation is so important. So back to the finding your zone of genius, right? Like
Yes.
I know something that I did a couple years ago, just like brain dump what I am good at, what I love to do. And that was kind of a starting point for me to
Yeah.
realize, okay, I know what needs to be that I need to do, and then what can be delegated to somebody else. And maybe maybe that's not the right way. I don't know because it's well, it's on the I am the perceiver of that, but it's
Works out
how
really well for me.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, so I mentioned too, right? There's different frameworks and different ways that you can communicate it.
Hmm.
The reason I gravitate towards the working genius, which is what I wound up getting facilitated in, is while it's similar to other formats that are out in the market, there's an implication for an individual. So I can do the assessment on myself. I can get my results. I can also share it with my team members, and we can see where there's overlap. We can see where there's gaps, and it's super simple to understand, right? Like you don't need a decoder ring, which is the issue with some of these assessments. Is like you need to read 100-page binder to even figure out what the results are. But it's more, there's more to identifying those geniuses than just it's A, B, and C, because our area of genius actually energizes us.
Hmm.
It's much more invigorating to do the type of work that just naturally comes to us, that we're naturally talented at. It actually energizes us instead of draining us.
Yep.
It energizes us, and we don't always think of work in that way, right? Like work is work and you think you're going to be exhausted at the end of the day, and yes, like there's some mental toll there, but also if it's things that you enjoy, it's like a long day at Disneyland versus a long day at the office, they're two different things, right? Because you had a lot of fun at Disneyland. So I kind of like to use that analogy. But in addition to the energy levels, there's also communication levels, right? So we talked about strategic versus tactical, or a little bit more in the weeds. Even the way that we communicate has a lot to do with our area of genius, because there's some people that are always thinking about innovation, right? Like how can we make this better? How can we improve upon this? And there's a time and a place for all of these geniuses that we have. Knowing what our geniuses are helps us better utilize them when the time is right, and when to kind of put a pause on it when maybe it's not the right time to use our genius. Um, and it helps us to share that with others, right? So let's say uh, it's not, but let's say one of my areas is wonder, which is really like pondering, oh, I wonder if we could do this better, right? That's an example of a genius.
Hmm.
And we've already started on a project. We've already got people doing the work. Great, great, great. Then I come in at the 11th hour after the work is already done and say, well, I wonder if we totally did it the opposite way on the totally opposite coast and we hired an entirely different firm to do that work. It's like, what? We're already more than 50% through where we are. Why? Because that's an example, right, of an inappropriate time for my genius. But if I know that about myself,
Hmm.
and the people around me know that about myself, it's a real easy way for you to keep me in check. It's like, I love that you're always thinking about how we can make things better, but right now is not the time and the place because we're already in the implementation phase. So that's why I really am a big fan of identifying geniuses that way, because there's so many implications, right? Like for our own awareness, for our communication, what energizes us. And then the one that I haven't mentioned is really like self acceptance, because I'll share a little bit about my journey. The reason I even went down this path originally was because past bosses, past mentors of myself didn't think the same way, didn't act the same way. Not that one was right and one was wrong, just different. But the way that they mentored me and led me was to be a mini version of them. Doesn't fit, doesn't feel good. And it left me feeling like, oh, I'm a failure. Like, I'm not meant to be a leader because I'm not like that. And so when I took this assessment, it was like decades old light bulb went off in my head to say, like, I don't need to be anything else but me and hone in on what I'm really good at, which is ironically helping people, which I already knew, right? Like, that's kind of what led me to being an executive coach. I love it. It energizes me. And that's okay that my brain doesn't work how all these other people's brains work. Awesome. We can actually complement each other. The areas where I lack, you can make up for it, and vice versa. Or like there might be times where we team up and it's really good. So I could talk about this all day. I'm going to let you get a word in edgewise.
No, I love it. I think it's so important, especially when, when you're working with others in a team. It's important to know everybody's benefits, everybody's value. So there's conversations that need to be had, that's in those circumstances. So you're recommending, number one, definitely do some self-assessments. There's a
Yeah.
ton out there, but you probably have some that you would probably personally recommend. Maybe we can share some of those. But so the self-assessment and then team self-assessment. So those are different things. I just recently did one for a board that I sit on. We all did these assessments, and then when we had our meeting, we all kind of went through them.
Yeah.
And it was really awesome, just to see just different areas of just our personality and what we feel, what are our biggest contributors? How do we contribute in what areas really is our ness, right? Or how we bring things to the table. So I love that. But so to the conversations when it comes to teams, right? So, and they do team assessments, and then probably it's the same format, right? You're doing the assessments, and then you're coming together and you're evaluating it together so that you can recognize, okay, this is where I shine, that's where you shine. And I think that is a foundation for healthy conversations of, okay, not feeling resentment at all at work, or this person's not pulling their weight, or that person's not doing what they're supposed to do. Now it comes from a more empathetic and sympathetic case where you can understand, okay, well, that's not where he rocks, that's not where she vibes. We need to have her do the things that she can best shine on, or he can best shine on, and same. So
When possible. When possible.
when
Because it's
possible,
not always possible.
I could only imagine.
Well, and in those cases, because we don't live in a perfect world, right? It's not like we're going to have a job that it's only the things that I love to do. Awesome. Like, sign me up. Like, I want to find it. I don't know where it is. But even knowing, like galvanizing is one of these geniuses under this framework, right? Which is like rallying the troops, the cheerleader, like everybody, like that is not me. That is not me. I tell you right now. But if I have to do it, I will do it.
Sure.
But if you know that about me, and you know that, like, I didn't have a choice, I had to do it, I took one for the team, you appreciating, like, hey, I know that is not your jam. I know that, like, it's draining for you to do that. Thank you so much for doing that for the team. Like, that in and of itself, right, is like, oh, okay, somebody sees me. Somebody knows, like, that was not easy for me. So it opens up all sorts of lines of communication, because to your point, not only does it take away the self-judgment, but then also judging others, right? Like, why does Sandra always do that? Like, she always brings that up in meetings. Like, why does she do that? But if I understand more about, like, how your brain works, how you communicate, just by these simple, identifiers, then it's
What
like,
you find important, what you don't find as important.
Yep. Or even maybe the way, like, you communicate something, like, okay, I know your mind is probably going to go here, or like it could go here, but let me tell you all the reasons why, we're going to be okay. And that might just streamline the communication. So and I love that you just went through that on a board, because it's a really good example. Is like, there's some aha moments that happen in that. It's like, oh, I didn't know that about you. Or I've had one as a facilitator where there was an area of frustration. So it's not necessarily a quote unquote weakness, but just like the type of work that really drains you, like it's not your favorite to do. And it came up on someone's results. They're like, oh, that's so weird. Like, you're always the one that does it. She's like, yeah, I don't have a choice. But then
That's
it was
funny.
like a light bulb of like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can do something. Like, let's talk. Maybe we can do something about that. It doesn't always have to fall on
Yeah.
you, but she was just doing it and expecting it. So
Yeah.
there's that. And the other thing too is your genius is going to be different than my genius. And what frustrates me may be different than what frustrates you. So if we have that awareness, is it helps us think things through a different lens, meaning just because something's draining for you doesn't mean it's draining. I'm sorry, something's draining for me doesn't mean it's draining for you. So I shouldn't assume, hey, if I delegate this to Sandra, she's going to hate it. Like, I don't want to do it. I'm going to hold on to it. So now
Yeah.
I'm miserable and you're miserable because you would have loved it if I gave that to you, right? Like the party planning task. You love it and I hate it, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to put that on your shoulders. Meanwhile, you would have loved it. So just kind of
Yeah.
understanding that about each other is also
Yeah.
super helpful and sometimes liberating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes that certain level of self-awareness, right? I think we, especially culturally, we have to seek these things out, right? So unless you're in personal development, professional growth, unless you're in this field and you're actively seeking out, or you're thinking these thoughts, right, or really self-checking, right? Because I think it's important. I had this conversation in one of the past two episodes. Really, just understanding our emotional intelligence, understanding
Mm.
how our emotions impact our reactions to things. And sometimes that could be biological, that could be emotional, that could be something going on in the body. So there are different reasons why some of those things may come out, but it's really acknowledging that and self-checking that, right? Like, so, and I haven't found, I mean, I've been in offices for a long time, but I've been an entrepreneur for a little bit longer now. um, I haven't, there's not always, there sometimes you have environments where everyone is at the same or similar headspace, and then there are some that are like, I have no idea what this person is thinking, or like, I don't know if he knows what he's doing, right? Or I don't, so it's like we walk around just thinking that I don't know if this person actually knows that those things they're saying are not working, they're actually building negative energy in this space,
Yeah.
versus positive stuff. So it does take a level of self awareness. So how would you, and I don't know, I'm sure you've come across this, right? So how would you, and do you have to advise someone or take them through a process of that emotional inner work?
Yeah, I mean, it it goes two ways, right? Like it applies to the individual, right?
Yep.
So depending on how they wind up assessing what their strengths are, whether that's just on other people's feedback, I wouldn't recommend just going off your own gut because I forget the exact percentage, but the percentage of us who are actually self-aware is this much
I
versus
believe it.
the ones of us that think we are self-aware, right? Like all of us think we're the greatest driver in the world. Many of us are not, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. I would encourage different methods, whether it's asking for feedback or doing one of these assessments to kind of get a better grasp on that. That's the individual perspective. And then there's also the like organization perspective of like, is someone a good fit? And none of it is black and white, right? It's not like, oh, you have these results, therefore you're a bad
Yeah.
fit, and let's get rid of you. But it could be if an individual takes an assessment or comes to realize that they are a big picture thinker. They love to live in the strategy of things. They love to think things through in the long term plan. But they're in a role um, that is actually very tedious and
Mm.
task oriented,
Yeah.
that could be an aha moment to be like, it's possible you're just in the wrong place or maybe in the wrong role.
Yeah.
Get curious with that, right? And it's not to say like, oh, quit your job. It's, are there other opportunities in this organization? Should you maybe look somewhere else? Or Do you want to maybe just ride it out for the next year? Because now you know this about yourself and you know that this is probably not the best long-term
Yeah.
solution for you.
Yeah.
And similarly on the organization side, right, is if someone isn't a good necessarily fit, apparently, like get super curious, right? I'm a big proponent. I mean, I'm sure you are as well, of diversity of thought. And sometimes that comes from just a diversity of people and backgrounds, but just diversity of thought and getting curious before we judge, like, oh, this person, like, he's in his own world. He doesn't know what's going on. Is he might actually have some really good ideas and just struggles to communicate them, right? And so
Yeah.
once we open up those lines of communication, like I'll tell you, I've experienced it as a people leader myself, right? Is uh, previous um, team members didn't have like the greatest quote unquote reputation, like slacker, not good at work. I'm like, okay, well, give me a shot here. Let me get curious. Let me work with this person, and wound up getting them into a different role other than where they were, right? It's not that they're not smart, not a hard worker. It's just
Yeah.
maybe it's not a right fit. So those are
Yeah.
some of my thoughts on
That's
it.
such a I love that, because that really is important for organizations to, number one, bring in somebody like you that can really help them put people in the right positions, or regroup, kind of switch some things around. Because sometimes you can have a really good employee that just isn't shining where they're particularly at. But it doesn't necessarily mean and they maybe have been with the company for years already. So there's a sense of loyalty there. At the same time, how does, number one, that person move up? What's the next step for them? So there's the planning side on the organizational level. How do I plan for my people to evolve with the company? Because we have that thirst to. Some people are complacent, they're good where they're at, and that works for them. That's their thing. That's wonderful. We need those. But then there is, from an organizational standpoint, is okay, how, there should be that need and that hunger to say, how do I, because when my people get better, the organization gets better. Number one, they're happy when they come to work, they enjoy their work, they're in their flow, they're in their zone of genius. And that no one is, you're not having a large turnover, you're not having
Yeah,
to replace all these people, and you're keeping the loyalty within the organization.
yeah,
um, so all right, let's talk on the entrepreneur side of that. um, because
yeah,
for the same things, for the same things we just shared, it's
yeah,
the it's the there's a lot of us on here, and when we don't have there's not anybody on our back. We are that organization. We are the ones that are driving that change, and kind of making that happen.
yeah,
So when you think about your zone of genius, especially for Latinas, again, we are multi-talented, we are problem solvers, we are the solution drivers, we are,
yeah,
I think intrinsically we just are,
yeah,
because of what these culturally, it's in our bloodline to make sure things work, right?
yep,
um, and some people can be intimidated by that, but I think that that's the power of Latinas,
yeah,
is our ability to do that. But so I hear all the time, and even in coaching sessions with my clients, that they're just all doing all of these things, and then they don't know what to delegate. They don't know, because they don't necessarily are in a position to hire somebody else to execute on some of those things.
yeah.
So, what would you say to that, when somebody does have to handle everything? They do, and then they're kind of finding, what is it that I love to do? It may not be the thing that generates the revenue. There's always a
It
line to that.
That can be a pitfall, though,
Yeah,
you're right, it's like,
yeah,
"It's my business, I can do whatever I
correct.
want. I'm gonna do all these things that bring me absolutely no business." Awesome.
Exactly.
Tell me how that works out for
Show
you.
business. Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so I guess it really depends on the season, that anyone may be in. Um, I would get curious on whether you really cannot afford to get help, right? It
True.
doesn't mean you
Yep.
have to hire a full-time employee.
Yep.
You could get a virtual assistant. You could get someone to help you with their marketing, like
Yeah.
freelance. there's a lot of options. There's definitely more than just hiring a full-time employee. But
Sure.
even if that is not a possibility, I mean, we need a whole lot more time to unpack all the things that an entrepreneur needs to do, but it would be to hone in on what's going to bring the business, what's going to bring in
Correct.
business, and what is going to help in the longevity of the business.
Yep.
And maybe that's a point where we kind of have to put our preferences to some extent in the back seat, right? I know you love being on social media. It will help you to some extent, but let's cut it
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
80% and let's focus on actually networking, because I know that's not your favorite thing, but we're going to have to do that if we actually want to get business. So that would be
Yeah.
my high level thoughts for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have a client who's a clothing designer, and that's what she just wants to do all the time. And that's what she does all the time. And there's the workload. Like, she doesn't like being on social media. That's not her thing. She does it
Mm,
because she has to do it, right? So that's the example for her. And she's great. She's amazing at what she's able to create. And that's her zone. She's alone, she creates beautiful pieces. Um, and then it's the all the things that come with that. It's the social
yeah,
media. It's being on our platforms. It's showing up all the time. Um, is not really where she flows.
yeah.
So that's. But I mean, her clothes still sell. It just, I think, we just keep having the discussion on what's the next step. How does she kind of separate herself from some of those
Yeah,
things?
yeah, and maybe sometimes it is just that as an entrepreneur, right? It's like, okay, I just need to do this until that, like, give yourself that
Yeah,
marker. But yeah, that's a good example. I mean, good on her because she's doing the things that she doesn't love because she knows it's good for her business. Like,
yeah, yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. No, that's part of our conversation all the time, and it's she's a character, but it's the consistency, and she's doing it right, with tools and different things, and now with AI, there's just so many things that we can do with the support of these systems that'll help us kind of get some of those things done. So that is awesome. So, how do we prioritize? When I was looking like our zone of genius, there's the goals, there's the prioritizing our goals that we need to do. I think you mentioned a little bit in the beginning of doing the stuff that maybe you don't want to do and get those out of the way first,
Yeah,
and then go into your
yeah.
flow.
I just wanted to make sure, do a time check because
Oh,
are we
yep,
good on time or?
yep. We got about 2 minutes left, and
Okay. Okay,
yep,
cool. Yeah, so yeah, the time boxing. That's what I love to do is especially in the morning. Like I just want to get it out of the way. All
yeah,
those things because I am a procrastinator by nature. So I will let that stuff sit all day long. But part of it is my own self-awareness, right? Like that's the way that my brain works. And the only way that well, not the only way, but a big driver to get me to do the type of work that is not my favorite is to just put it on the calendar and force myself to do it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Find what works for you. Find just being clear on like, okay, this is not my favorite stuff. How am I going to deal with it? And then commit to yourself to actually do that.
yep, yep. I love it. I love it. Sandra, it's been so awesome having you. This is such an important conversation. I definitely think we need to unravel this more, and maybe do some tests with our members, and
Yeah.
have everybody take some of these self-assessments. That would be probably really awesome
Yeah.
for everybody to do. But thank you for joining. Would love for you to close out with any last statements you want to share. And before you guys log off, make sure that you're joining us in the Mighty Hub, unitedlatinas.mn.co, because we're all in there and we're going to continue the conversation in there. And lots of great things are coming. And I'm going to shoot you an email after this because we're putting together a space it's all about mindset, and it's Neuro Latinas. And I think you
Ooh.
would be great to add to that conversation in there. But
Yeah.
yeah, let me know.
Yeah.
Close us out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, if anyone is listening to this and is not yet a part of United Latinas, highly, highly encourage you to do so. Let's connect there on LinkedIn. You can search my name on LinkedIn. I just highly, highly encourage you to go on that journey of self awareness and honing in on your zones of genius. it will definitely make your life easier. Might be hard in the short term, but it'll be easier in the long run.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome. 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 Thank you guys for joining us. Definitely stay tuned for next week. Catch us next week and all the new events. We have an event tonight about how to be a paid public speaker. So hope you guys join us there
I'll be
as
there.
well. Yay. All right, guys. Take care. Be blessed. Have a great one.
Bye.